We have some really great news to share with you today, Warriors. Josh Golin is the executive director at FairPlay for Kids. Josh is passionate about creating a safer, less addictive internet for children where young people's needs come before advertisers and big tech's profits. Josh speaks all over the place, parents, community members, schools, businesses, to journalists, media, policymakers, lawmakers, whatever we want to call it. Josh is all over the map with what he's talking about, but because he wants to create a healthier media environment for children and teens. And, Josh lives in Vermont with his family, and the mission at FairPlay, and we've spoken to Josh before, but not in a little while, is helping children thrive in this increasingly commercialized, screen-obsessed culture. And it's really the only organization, right, Josh, that's dedicated to ending marketing to children. So the advocacy is grounded in the overwhelming evidence that child-targeted marketing and the excessive screen time it encourages undermines kids' healthy development. You know what? The website is fairplayforkids.org. Josh, I got to get right to you. I usually talk very fast, but see, I'm going very slow today so I can get this all out. We have some groundbreaking news to share with you. Vermont becomes the first state in the country to ban schools from contacting students through social media. Did everybody hear me? Banning. We love this. The new law also adds Vermont to the growing list of states with bell-to-bell, phone-free schools policies. Josh Golin, welcome back to the Warriors.
Great to see you, Lynn. Thanks for having me.
Now, listen, Josh, show some excitement because I think this is so exciting that this is, we have to have some good news because there's a lot going on,
Yes.
Here. So let me ask you something. So Vermont, where you live, just became the first state in the nation to stop schools from contacting students through social media. What message does this send to the rest of the country about the role of schools and technology?
Well, I think it sends an incredibly strong message that social media, as it is currently constituted, is not safe for kids and should not be required for any children, which is what was happening. I think, we were, and you have schools, right? You have all these school districts around the country who are suing social media companies for their impact on their students' mental health. Over 1,000 school districts are involved in those lawsuits. At the same time, you have schools, usually with after-curricular activities, who are communicating with students using social media. Those very same platforms that they're suing, the schools are actually using to communicate with students. And so what the message that sends is, if I am in the acting club or on the soccer team and my coach is posting changes to the practice schedule or sending out important announcemements over Instagram or Snap or TikTok, it sends a message that as a student, I have to be on social media if I want to participate in these school activities. So in Vermont, that will no longer be allowed. It is a first of its kind law. I think it's groundbreaking. And I think, not only does that mean that all of the students in Vermont will no longer be required by their schools to be on social media or get contacted over social media by their schools. But again, it starts to stigmatize social media, which is what we want to do. We want to say, if you are a school and you care about children's well-being, then you should not be contacting your students using this harmful product.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, I'm going to keep saying it like a broken record. I think this is the most exciting, groundbreaking news I've heard in a long time because I believe, Josh, that it'll start to snowball now. Others will come on board. Like, you're the leader. It's okay, everybody. And they're going to come on board. I think it's so incredibly necessary, as we all know, and just so exciting. Is it true, Josh, that you called it absurd that kids had to use apps like TikTok or Snapchat just to participate in school life? Is that true?
Yeah, we did. And in fact, so it's kind of a cool story what happened here. A couple of years ago, FairPlay runs an action network where we house all of our passionate, talented advocates who are fighting back against big tech and trying to get kids off of their phones and devices so that they can have the experiences that really promote healthy child development. And and that group is in regular contact. We like many groups, we share articles and talk about what's going on in the world with each other. And parents in that group just started getting, and teachers started getting increasingly angry that that schools were communicating with students using social media. And I believe it was right after the Surgeon General came out with his warning about social media, and they said, well, why don't we write to the Department of Education? Maybe the Department of Education isn't even aware that this is going on the regular, and ask the DOE to issue some guidance. And so we did that, and we got a lot of leading experts to sign on to that letter, as well as a lot of organizations that we work with, because whenever we do things, we do it in coalition at FairPlay. And unfortunately, and we met with DOE, and unfortunately, they were not ready to take that kind of step. But one of the members of that work group, Laura Derringer, was also interested in getting a phone-free school bill in her home state of Vermont. And so she met with a local rep who was going to introduce that bill. And she said, you know what, why don't we not just do phone-free schools like so many states are doing? Why don't we also include this prohibition on schools not being able to contact people over social media? And so it was this really grassroots idea that started with the grassroots members of FairPlay going to DOE. It didn't work with DOE, but Laura was not deterred, and she kept going. And it was her idea that became law just last week.
I mean, it's so exciting. You know, Josh, it just goes to show our hashtag at the Warriors is community creates change. And community created the change in the state of Vermont. I mean, I think it's also such, you're such role models to show people there is a positive result at the end of, you know, some hard work. How do you think, Josh, I can't help but ask, so many things are changing, I feel like, on a daily basis, but how was it allowed to get this far? Do you think people just weren't paying attention? And I'm talking about overall, you know, around the country, things are so out of control, whether it's phones in the classrooms, contacting kids, you know, social media, people not paying attention at all. Why do you think it's spiraled so out of control? What do you share with us? I don't know, any kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think the big tech, the social media companies did a really good job of, you know, marketing social media as being this great transformative tool that was going to help kids socially and help them connect. You know, and not to mention was so great for the economy. All right. I mean, I just, you know, the fact that we all talk about how harmful social media is to young people is a fairly recent phenomenon. I mean, just go back 5-6 years ago, and the conversation was so much different. And so I think, you know, that one thing that schools often fall into a trap, and not just schools, but a lot of us, they fall into a trap of like, let's reach kids where they are. And so if the kids are on Snapchat, well, of course, we should be doing the announcements about the swim team over Snapchat, because we want to reach kids where they are. And I think sometimes what schools don't pause to think about is how do they participate in shaping that youth culture, and how can they be a voice for changing that culture? And so I think it just becomes the default thing. The easier thing to do is just, you know, schools are actually using social media to contact kids. And I think there's just a huge disconnect, because many of these same schools were hosting like forums with parents about, you know, the dangers of social media and what social media is doing to our kids' mental health. And they weren't thinking about the fact that they were actually participating in making social media mandatory or feel mandatory for a lot of their students. So I think, you know, what we've seen over the past few years is a huge increase in research and evidence, you know, showing the harms of social media. We have seen a huge parent uprising. You know, it was a few years ago, we were arguing about whether social media was a problem for kids. Now we're arguing about what are the solutions. That's a huge step forward, Lynn, like to go from arguing about is there a problem to what are the best solutions. And so I think things are changing rapidly. And I would expect that once the word gets out about this Vermont law, that many other states will either pass it as a standalone law or by attaching it to their phone-free schools bill, because so many states now are going to phone-free.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's go back, Josh. You mentioned the former Surgeon General, Murthy. He had put out this youth mental health advisory. He also did a follow-up, I believe, to it, and it started a couple of years ago. Now, fast forward to now. Explain, Josh, for our Warriors, the importance of phones not in the classrooms, you know, for the kids' mental health. Give us kind of the landscape about that, because at least if they have a couple of hours without phones, they'll have some sort of break from all of this. It doesn't cure everything, right? But at least they'll be able to focus a little bit. Teachers can teach. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so I think there is a huge movement and a huge parent and educator movement right now for phone-free schools. And the reasons for this are many. I mean, first of all, our kids are spending basically every waking hour on their
Mhm.
phones. And in fact, they're waking up a lot in the middle of the night because they're checking their phones. And so if we can carve out 6, 7 hours a day when kids are in school and they're not checking their phones constantly, they're not getting notifications from social media, they're giving their brain a rest, so they're not thinking about constantly about what's the next thing I'm going to check or the next thing I'm going to post. I think it's an enormous gift that we can give kids for their mental health, but it goes beyond that. I mean, I can't imagine what it is like to be a teacher in this day and age and to be competing with kids who all have their phones on their lap, who have access to the world's biggest arcade, the world's biggest porn collection, to be able to be talking to all of their friends who aren't even in that class at that same time, to be worried about what's happening socially so you're not paying attention to your teacher. I mean, this is a gift that we can give both our teachers and students, the ability to unplug from social media and our phones so that they can actually concentrate on their learning, which is what they're there to do in school. And I think what the research shows and what I'm so excited about is that it's not just taking those phones away during class time or saying that they have to be away during class time, but so many states, I think Vermont was the 13th state now to pass what's called the bell-to-bell policy, which means that those phones go away the moment you enter the school building and that you don't get them back until the school day is over. So that means, first of all, teachers do not have to be police and ask for those phones in every single class. It's just one time you're collecting them or making sure that they're going away a day. But also, schools are reporting that kids are talking to each other in the cafeteria. There's noise in the hallway again because people are actually socializing with their peers instead of walking down the hallways with this glued in front of their face. And also things like behavioral incidents improve too, because so many of the behavioral problems and the fights that we see in school, half the reason kids are fighting is so they can be filmed and put on social media. And so when you take those phones away and you get kids thinking about when there's a fight, actually we should be working to break it up or to be getting an adult rather than filming it for popularity on social media, you start changing the whole school culture.
Yeah, I love that. Josh, I have to ask you a question. So our governor, Kathy Hochul here in New York, she is implementing this bell to bell starting, I believe, in September, the new school year. So I'm very happy about that. But here's why I'm not that happy, because I'm asking like schools and teachers that we work with, like what's the plan rollout? What does it look like in your state? Because in New York, they don't seem to know, the teachers I'm talking to. Like, walk me through, like, what did the kids show up with their phones? Do they put them in cubbies? Do they put them in yonder pouches? Just so I have too many people asking me, and New York, believe it or not, has not given me, I have not seen the clear plan, although we're doing it.
Yep. So in Vermont, actually, our law does not go, or at least the phone-free portion of the bill does not go into effect until 2026. And so what's going to happen is the Department of Education, the Vermont Department of Education, is going to write rules and guidelines for schools so that they'll have some guidance. It's a little disappointing that we have to wait a year, but it does give that extra time so that every school will get that guidance before they have to implement that. But FairPlay has also worked with the Phone Free Schools movement to put out toolkits for administrators on how to implement phone free schools. We have everything in there about like how to write your policy, how to send letters to parents so they understand the new policy, how to get your students on board. So it's really not brain science. It's a pretty simple thing to implement, and we've actually have a toolkit to make it even easier for schools. And so would encourage our listeners in New York to download that toolkit and send it to your superintendent or to your principal and say, here's some very concrete ways that you can implement this so that school kids are phone free all day.
Well, Josh, you just answered my next statement, which was, in the body of this video, I will have everything about FairPlay and their toolkit, because FairPlay has done all the work for you, the heavy lifting, and all you have to do is download it, use it, copy it, spread it, share it. It's done for you. What could be easier? So that, Josh, obviously will be in the body of the video, because I use all of FairPlay's. I mean, you do all the work. Why do I have to
Thank
do
you.
it? You do, and it's excellent. So, I use that. Now let's get into, I heard one time that teachers were telling me, they were getting pushback from the parents, not the kids even. It was more like on the adult side, the parents want constant contact. People are afraid in the world these days, what's happening type of thing. So what do you say to those critics? We'll call them critics who might say this is out of touch. We live in this environment of social media. How can I get a hold of my child? What have you experienced with that?
Well, I think first of all, I think we need to be empathetic with parents who say things like that. I mean, we do live, I think one thing that's on every parent's mind is school shootings. They happen far too often, and obviously they are so horrific. And so,
Yeah.
what we just try and do is talk to parents and kind of walk them through each of like possible uses that they might feel like they need for their phone during the school day. And then, I think the number one that comes up is like school shooting incidents, and that they want to be able to reach their kids if something like that happens. And I think it's important for parents to understand that law enforcement supports phone-free schools. And in fact, the worst thing that parents can be doing, it's understandable. If I knew that my daughter's school was under attack, of course, the first thing I would want to do is reach out to her. But actually, we keep our kids safer when we're not, if they are in a lockdown, if they are hiding from a shooter. The last thing we want is them making noise on a phone or responding to beeps and pings. And so what it actually keeps kids safer if they don't have phones and are only paying attention to the adults who have been trained for these really horrific and scary situations. So that's number one. The second thing that we hear all the time is like, we need to let our child know who's picking them up after school, or if we're in a two-parent, a divorced family, like maybe it was going to be dad, but now it's going to be mom who's picking up. We want to let the student know about that. And what we say to those folks is, there's no reason why your student needs to know at 11 o'clock who they're going home with at 3 o'clock. Like, we understand the impulse that you want to be able to share that information, but if your student is getting their phone right after school, as soon as it's over, and seeing who is picking them up, like, there's just really no instances that we've been able to find where parents need to communicate and it couldn't wait. And if it can't wait, you and I lived through this when we went to school, right? Our parents could call the school office if there truly was a reason that they needed to reach us for something that couldn't wait till after school. And honestly, it's good for kids. It's good particularly as kids get to be adolescents. It's good for them to have a little break from their parents. I think, this sort of constant texting back and forth with parents can actually be a problem when it comes to doing the natural work of adolescence, which is separating from your parents. And so understand completely why parents feel this way. But I think we need to reassure them that just about anything that they need to text to their kids can wait until after school. And if it can't, they can really call the school office and they'll take care of them, just like they did when you and I were growing up, Lynn.
I was going to say, Josh, again, stepping on my thunder. How did we ever make it without phones? And our parents, my school had a pay phone in the basement. If you had to use that, or the parent had to call the office and you'd get a message or something like that. But how did we ever make it?
Calling cards, remember those?
Yo. Oh, I remember it all. I mean, I remember the payphones were a nickel. I'd be looking for the nickel, like in my pocket. I go back a little bit. But you know what, Josh, that reminds me, I read something interesting. It was an article out of the Atlantic that a lot of homes now, people are getting into this trend of putting actual phones back in their homes, right? Because this way they're taking the kids' phones away, or they're limiting use on them. And this way the child or teen has to use the family phone, like when we grew up, kind of thing. And it is apparently taking off. I've heard a few people talking about it as well, besides this article, which I just read a couple of days ago. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, there's really nothing new in the world. People are putting landlines back in their homes, right? Have you heard anything about this?
I haven't heard about this, but I love it because I think, we call them phones, but like that's like the thing we use them for almost the least. And if we can separate out some of those functions and say, of course, you can still talk to
Yes.
your friends, but you're not going to be on social media for 8 hours while you're quote unquote talking to your friends, or you're not going to be playing games all that time. I think it's great, and I think one of the things, not just young people, but adults too, is we become so dependent on our phone for everything. Whether it's our alarm clock, it's our map, it's all of these things, and so we do that to ourselves, and then we feel like we can't separate from our phones. But when we are with our phones, obviously, we don't always do what we intend to do. We often get sucked into wasting a lot of time, and that's just And when it comes to kids, there's even worse things than wasting time. Like there's being exposed to things that kids just shouldn't be exposed to.
Exactly. All of those, predators, but we'll leave that for a moment because wherever the kids are, so are the predators. We have to be realistic about that. But you reminded me of something. The article was pointing out it gets them off of texting. If there's a phone in the home, because the mother will say, like, you have 20 minutes to talk to your friend. So it reduces all of those other things they were pointing out in the article. I thought it was quite interesting. Now, let me ask you, Josh, I feel like Vermont's really a leader in, I'm going to say, or maybe you consider yourselves a leader in Vermont, like digital safety, child. I'm kind of going in that direction. What is this Vermont Kids Code I was reading about? What is that?
Yeah, the Vermont's Kids Code is a bill. It's similar to bills that are passed in California and Maryland and Nebraska. And what it is it says that essentially that when you process a child's data, you have to do it in a way that's not harmful to the child. And so that makes companies responsible for instance, what is the content that their algorithms that are pushing things to kids. It also has limitations on notifications and how online platforms that are likely to be accessed by children are designed. So it's not a bill about infringing on anybody's free speech, but it really holds the companies accountable for how they're using kids' data and how they're designing their platforms. And as I said, it's a bill now that's there's some version of it in 4 different states. And so I would consider Vermont a leader when you take our kids code plus our phone and social media free schools bill combined. I think it really we're addressing when they're in school, and we're addressing what it's like when they're not in school, so that these platforms have to be more accountable.
Yeah. Now I'm going to throw a big one at you. Answer any way you see fit, Josh. Now, like, what do you want to tell other states right now? I'm very serious, Like in our dream world, I want you to tell them what they should be doing right now, or stepping up, or collaborating with, because I really feel like I know it's state by state, all of these things, Josh. Definitely more collaboration or more discussion, I think. But what do you want states to be looking at right now?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the phone free schools bills are some of the easier things to get done. I'm not going to say it's easy. Legislation is always hard, but compared to some of the other things, and frankly, we have not seen industry push back on the phone free school bills, and that makes it a lot easier to pass legislation when you're not fighting against Meta and Google and Snap. So I would say, that is the lowest hanging fruit, is these phone free schools bills. And I would combine it with, like we did in Vermont, I would combine it with a prohibition on schools contacting kids through social media. I think, our legislation should and can be a model. After that, I would say, I think you need to some kind of safety by design legislation. Legislation that holds platforms accountable for the way that they are deliberately designing their platforms for addiction. Because when they design their platforms for addiction, they hurt our kids in 2 ways. They hurt them, first of all, because they spend too much time on these platforms and they displace a lot of the activities that they should be doing. And the ways that they addict kids are harmful in and of themselves. So sending kids down dangerous rabbit holes, getting kids to post more frequently, getting kids to make more connections, because that's what you're taught to do on social media, is have as many friends as possible. So people accept friend requests from strangers. So I think this, a kids code or some kind of safety by design legislation and a phone free schools bill is the best thing that states can be doing right now.
Right. Because we want to also point out, Josh, there truly is internet addiction, digital addiction. Kids get
Absolutely.
addicted. We're seeing it. There are numerous. There's too much to even talk about. And frankly, parents and grandparents will always say to me, "Why does this happen?" And it's a crass answer, but it's the truth. See if you agree with me. Well, there's a lot of money to be made. Big tech's making a lot of money off of everybody, and that's kind of the bottom line. And our kids are the product, right? And without accountability, they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and make more and more money. So we have to make sure everybody knows, because people actually seem, Josh, like shocked when I say, yes, there's something, internet addiction. They almost don't believe me. And I'm here in New York City, doing a lot of my talking. So I find it incredible that people push back on that.
I'm actually a little surprised on that, Lynn, because I think that and I wonder if you break it down a little bit and say, like, some of the symptoms of addiction, like,
Yes.
is the phone interfering with your child's sleep? Is it interfering with other activities? When you ask them to put the phone down, do they get angry? Do you have conflict around how much they use their phone? Because almost every parent of an adolescent is going to say yes to at least most of those questions. And to your point, this is absolutely about money. Our kids are worth more to these companies when they're on their phones than when they're off their phones. And it is too easy to design for addiction. It's too easy to design your product to get kids to be using it compulsively and to be checking their phones compulsively. And so it really does come down to the business model and the fact that these companies have an easy way to make money off of our children. And we need to stop that.
Absolutely. I want to ask you, Josh, as we finish up, what do you want to say to parents watching who may feel, we have a lot of grandparents that watch the Warriors as well, who feel overwhelmed or powerless? Because right now there's a lot of hope. For instance, this in Vermont, no social media. This is tremendous. This is exciting. I actually think, although there's a lot going on, I have a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope out there, a lot of parents stepping up. You pointed that out earlier. We've got FairPlay, marching over the country, educating everybody about getting the phones out of the classrooms. What do you want to say to them? What is the first step they can really take? We talked about the phones out of the classrooms. I mean, I think that's the easiest one. Frankly, you've done all the work. It's there for them to present, right, to their schools. Get that going. But what do you want to say about a lot of them will say, I don't have a voice in my school, or the other parents don't want this. What do you want to say to these parents right now?
I mean, my first thing I would say is stop thinking about this as something that you have to deal with by yourself. Stop thinking of this as a parenting challenge and start thinking of this as a collective action problem. And that the tech companies want this to be all about, we'll give parents a few more tools. And they don't say that they'll hide them and make them really hard to use, or that essentially in order for a parent to keep up with everything their kid is doing online, it would be a full-time job. So we need to get parents out of that mindset, like, this is all up to me to protect my child, and thinking about, what can I do to be part of a community or part of a movement to change our society's relationships and our children's as a whole, their relationships with technology. And that may sound a little intimidating, but my suggestion is start with one conversation. Start with one friend of a parent or a grandparent of somebody who's an adolescent, and just ask them, are you happy with the way your child uses their phone? Are you happy with what they experience on social media? Are you happy with the way that a social media based culture is shaping who your child thinks they are, their values, their sense of self, what it means to be a friend? Everything important is being shaped by social media. And I suspect when you have those conversations and you frame it that way, you will see that the other person is also similarly concerned. People just don't know what to do. So the first thing we need to do is start having those conversations so that we can understand and take these on, whether it's in a school as a community, or, advocating for a bill like the Kids Online Safety Act, with countrywide coalitions. But I think the biggest thing to realize is what's happening in your home is happening in tens of millions of homes around the country. And talk to other parents, and you will no longer feel alone. And when we don't feel alone, then we can act collectively, and that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, power in numbers, Josh Golin. I want to say to you, fairplayforkids.org is the website. I will have everything, Josh, everything in the body of this video because I really want people to understand there's so much good information, so many free resources, right, that they can utilize. And Fair Play certainly is at the forefront of all of this. Josh Golin, Executive Director of Fair Play, thank you for your courage. I want to also say your clarity and your community work and commitment to protecting our children from these digital predators. You truly are a warrior. You're my go-to expert. I don't even know if you know that, Josh, but I'm always scouting around the Fair Play, picking up so much education, but so much information, and then sharing that with my, boots on the ground and my parents and grandparents. So thank you for standing up for truth. I'm going to even throw in some sanity because you're very sane, Josh, and we need that. And thank you for standing up for childhood itself. I hope we speak again soon because there's so much going on, Josh. We do need clarity, and we need, sane information. And we need tremendous information like Vermont. I mean, I think this is so groundbreaking, terrific, and we applaud you and thank you for all the work you're doing. So let us speak again, Josh Golin, because you truly are a warrior.
I would love to speak soon, Lynn. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Josh. Talk again soon.
Bye-bye.